I thought I'd just do a quick video, or as quick as I can be, when discussing a huge topic like repression and coming out of repression and migraines. So basically a history of my migraines is that they started when I was really young, around 8 to 10. And a lot of repression that I was going through at that stage has become much more obvious now that I've done a lot of repression work, and I've kind of realized that a lot of repression and trauma symptoms kind of, in a way, prevent us from recognizing the actual story in its entirety. We may intellectually understand it, but there's not this kind of full emotional embodiment of, oh yeah, this is what happened to me. It kind of remains fragmented and in disparate parts. So yeah, I can now clearly see that when I was really young, all of these different things I was doing was repression. A lot more so than other kids my age. Like, I was reading under the table at school and was doing that addictively, which started, I must have been grade 3 or 4 or something like that. There were other problematic behaviors that came about around that time as well, and couldn't listen at school. And then that kind of progressed into a little bit of self-harm, not too much, but then that turned to like drinking, and then from drinking started using morphine IV by myself. I didn't really have any friends that were doing it at the time. I didn't even have a friends group that were really into drugs, but I started doing that. So yeah, it just seemed to happen almost automatically, and it took me a long time to figure out why. And alongside all of that, I was having migraines. And so when I first started KI, I basically wanted to overcome the trauma of addiction, but then found that I could work with my migraine in this way. And so, yeah, I guess I could talk about it for a really long time, but I'll just try to make it as quick and easily understandable as possible. So, number one tool working with migraines really is that, actually no, before I start, I'll get to the tools in a sec. I just want to talk about actually what the process has looked like, what a migraine looks like for me, and what the process looks like working through the migraine from when I first started doing KI to where I am now. So first started getting migraines when I was, as I said, 8 to 12. Intense pain, like I'm lying in my bed, just constant like constriction, pain, no idea where it's coming from. Like, I used to just feel like bashing my head up against the post of my bed just because it was just so painful. I would get sick, I'd be nauseous, I'd start vomiting, like all this different stuff. So yeah, and then as time progressed, I tried all these different medications for it, including using like OxyContin and morphine and stuff like that. So that wasn't good. And then after that, once I got clean, I started using meditation and awareness-based practices, and I noticed the migraine symptoms started to dissipate. So I thought, oh, hang on, okay, so this is definitely an emotional thing, because meditation and awareness-based practices, they do give you this kind of emotional processing ability that you don't have without it. It does help at least clear the surface level of some of your consciousness, and as a result, there'll be a lot of emotional processing that happens because you're clearing that surface level, and a lot of the unconscious can come up naturally. But of course, this only goes so far, and that's why you need a more thorough, in-depth tool like KI. So it could only get me so far, and I actually found like my awareness-based practices before I came to KI were being used as like an effective painkiller, really. So like with the migraine, I would just kind of like, every time I noticed that I was in pain or attached to the pain, I would kind of just like and push, not push it away, but it's kind of like this deactivation of the mental component, the mental reaction, by asking questions like, am I identified with the pain? Yes. Okay. Switch off. And just kept doing that. And just like, kind of like what Rupert Spira points out about like, untangling yourself from your somatic experience, or yeah, whatever you're experiencing. It's hard to put into words. But so I started to do that. And that was really effective, actually. And I found that I could just zone out through the migraines because I had no other choice. And then I started doing KI. Now, when I first started doing KI on it, the migraine was just a pain that felt like it was, how do I describe it? There's this like joke about the guy that goes to the doctor and he's poking himself everywhere and is like, this hurts and this hurts and this hurts and this hurts. And so he thinks his whole body's broken, and the doctor says, oh, maybe it's just your finger. Similar thing with the migraine is like everything outside is just painful and annoying, and there's such a psychological element to it. And then for me, I was like, man, maybe this is just mental, because it's not like, doesn't feel like a physical pain, because you know, if I hurt my leg or I get a regular headache from dehydration or whatever, then what'll happen is like I'll have the headache, but it won't be as intense. I won't be as emotional. It'll be much more obvious that it's a physical thing and that I'm in control of my mental state. Whereas with a migraine, it's just like ow, 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 ow. Everything hurts. So that raised a lot of questions, and I had some experiences over the years, like when I first got into rehab, and I thought maybe I'm really sad, and I felt really separate from myself, and I had a migraine, and I started doing like a version of IRF, like I'm sad, 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 bang, and it kind of broke through that wall. So that made me go, it's emotional. But then I never really, in a weird way, you don't clue onto it, because I guess repression is like this mechanism that wants to keep going, because it's based in survival. So anyway, yeah, when I first started out doing these practices, it was much more this ball of pain, which I didn't understand. And then over time, I've unraveled it to the point where it's like, okay, I'm getting a much less frequent. So initially when I first started out, they increased in frequency for a bit. So I was getting 1 a week, 2 a week, for a couple of months. But then each time I moved through that, there was a lot of healing. There was a lot of centering that was happening, even though I was working with a lot of pain. And then what was happening was those migraines started to get more spaced out, less intense. And sometimes a migraine would start to come on, and then I would notice it kind of glitch, and I'd be like, wow, okay. Usually, like, I felt like this fear like come up, like, oh God, here we go, another migraine, and then it just go. So, and then now sometimes I will still get a bit of a migraine, but yeah, I mean, it still sucks. It's painful and it hurts, but it's much more obvious what I'm moving through, and I can still do the things that I need to do and function in my life while having the migraine. So, I mean, really, like, if you want to work with a migraine, all of the basic human emotions are repressed in the migraine, in my experience. You know, I at first thought maybe it's just anger repression, maybe it's sadness repression, but then I got layers of disgust. I started inquiring, and then maybe there's some disgust, and I was like, oh, yep, there's disgust. Oh, yeah, so it just seems as if repression, at least in my case, it's repression of all of the core human emotions that affects the migraine. So, yeah, and there's layers of realization to that. There's like the migraine, you don't have an insight once and then it's over and done with. It's like you progressively experience the same thing over and over again. And oh, I've repressed sadness. No, I've really repressed sadness. Okay, yeah. And then so that has been integral for me to move through, is feeling and experiencing all the different layers of what I've repressed. And each time it's like coming back to yourself more fully. So yeah, the number one tool, I think, is the core thread throughout the whole thing is just acceptance, welcoming, like, because otherwise it's so painful to work with. And in the early days, it was like with this really intense pain. welcoming that pain. Because at that time, it's like, I'd get it at night. There's no planned facilitation session. So you have to do it yourself. And so I found that I had to really set aside that time, sit down, lay down, and spend a long time welcoming it. It's funny because, you watch some videos on people having overcome chronic pain through KI or whatever, and it's like, oh, it sounds so simple, and they're just talking about it as if it just like is nothing. There must be something wrong with me, because they're just talking about it as if it was like going down to the shops. But yeah, so you've really got to be patient with yourself. And I was laying down on my bed for hours and welcoming it, because it just doesn't want to be seen. So yeah, spirit hands, gradually welcoming it, and like slowing my mind right down at this stage through. I've done a lot of meditation practice as well, so that was helpful. But yeah, slowing my mind right down, working through the outer layers of the migraine, and then bringing out all of the thoughts, the feelings in it, continually welcoming it, and listening. That was another thing, listening to whatever it has to say. That's a very hard skill to tune into, actually, and one that I'm starting to like develop a bit more, because it's different to acceptance listening. It's like just listening to your body, listening to what it needs. That's just a whole, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that takes a long time. And what was really useful was that coaxing the deer out of the forest with that metaphor, plus the spirit hands doing that for long periods of time, allowing the energy to do whatever it wants, whatever it needs. And then I think at this stage, early on in the migraine, the most intense repressed thoughts were coming out. There were suicidal thoughts, thoughts that life's meaningless, all this sort of stuff. And so, yeah, I kind of really kept welcoming it until the energy of it wasn't dark anymore. It was much more like I could listen to it, and it was almost like I could be in communication with it. And then at that stage, I started to have a dialogue with it, like, yeah, and that was like just like, what do you need, what do you want, that sort of thing. But you can't do that until you get like you're fully facing it, fully accepting it. If you're rejecting it at all, you're not going to be able to have that dialogue. When you have a dialogue like that, it feels like something very healing is taking place, and it's not forced at all. It's like you're truly listening to this other part of yourself. So that was a huge part of my early migraine work, was getting to those parts. So, and then over time, different layers came up, and yeah, so lots of different layers to the migraine: disgust, anger, sadness, shame, guilt, all part of it. So yeah, your number one tool is welcoming all of that. And of course, like, all the tools work at different stages, but the threads of it for me have been like, okay, if you learn all the skills, that works, but the welcoming is a very deep skill. Welcoming words, especially, like resting with the energy of that, like really doing it rather than, okay, yeah, I'm resting. It's like a full, I'm going to accept this and rest with it, and that takes time and practice to get to that as well. And experimentation, because repression is repressed. So all of the different emotions that we're repressing, especially if they're like core repressed emotions, they're the ones we most don't want to look at. So we're the most resistant to it. So we might not catch a single thought even on the surface level of the pain that is a real indicator of what's driving the pain. So what I found was, like, I would just, if something's not working, I've been doing sadness repression. Okay, that's not working. Shame repression not working. Okay, well then switch to anger repression, and don't just ask the question once. ask it multiple times, and then make sure we're doing it properly as well, like asking it, listening for a response, and instead of this automatic like asking, yep, no response, asking, no, we could get really impatient with ourselves. So asking with the genuine intention to listen. A lot of the time I would sit there, and one of the things that I would break through the migraine with was like, I just want to see what's there. That was kind of like the curiosity element of it. Like, I just want to know. I don't want to change or alter this experience at all. I just want to understand, and I just want to know. And then that's when it would start to reveal itself a lot more to me. So, yeah. Experimentation and catching those if there is slippery thoughts, lots of slippery thoughts. Like, by that I mean, it's like sometimes we're so used to a regular deficiency story, like I'm worthless, and there might be other little associated thoughts that are just whispers. Catching those, bringing those up on to my screen of awareness was actually huge, because I'd be like, oh, where do you think you're going? Like, bring it up, and I would go, wow, this thought that would just be a whisper was kind of like, that whisper was me trying to go, whoop. I try to cover it up really quickly. I didn't want to look at it. So bringing that up often was like, okay, this is a whole new pathway that I haven't looked into. And then if it does get too much, like, because we are unearthing so many different complicated things, journaling it out, writing it out, has been really useful. And then a lot of the time I'd be working with the migraine, and I think, that didn't go anywhere. Like, then I'd go for a walk and have a complete breakdown. So, and then feel like just waves and waves of like, I'm reconnecting to myself. It's very intense. So very healing and very, yeah. And then naturally, spontaneously, all the things that I'd been repressing, the anger, the sadness, would just come about in my life without me having to control or manipulate it. I just had to see through those core programs. There's probably more, but this video's gone on for 70 minutes now, so it's a lot. But yeah, if I can think of any other things, I'm kind of getting clearer and clearer what the path has been like for my migraines, and I hope it's a helpful video, because there are some parts when I'm working with the migraine where I can see where people, because I don't have as many life responsibilities as some other people, and I could just see if you get to that point, you're like, oh my God, this is overwhelming. Maybe this is not real. Maybe I'm crazy, whatever. So hopefully maybe hearing that that's part of the process as well, and that all these different things that you're experiencing are normal. Maybe that'll be helpful. And yeah, so good luck.